The stars were dimming, their light stretched thin across the endless black, as though the galaxy itself had grown weary of shining. Worlds once gilded in conquest lay hollow now, broken citadels drifting in orbit, their ruins casting shadows across the void. In that silence, an old truth whispered, nothing built by mortals or gods could stand forever. Empires, no matter how vast, fell to dust. Even legions bred for war could not silence the slow decay of eternity. It was there, at the threshold of another forgotten battlefield, that the Alpha Legion first moved, not with thunder, but with silence, slipping through shadow like the breath of a dying world. And before this story unfolds, let us say to you, we truly love and care for you. Wherever you are, wherever your voice lingers in this long night, you matter in ways untold. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now let's get started. The war had already ended before most even knew it had begun. A sun collapsed into itself above a world unnamed on Imperial charts, its flare washing over empty trenches and scorched fortresses. The Alpha Legion's banners, once raised high, were buried beneath ash, their serpentine sigils carved into stone and bone. Among the wreckage, Alpharius stood, or perhaps Omegon, for who could tell. His helm concealed his face, but beneath the ceramite mask, his eyes narrowed against the starlight that seemed to mock him. Victory, they had called it. Yet every triumph in shadow left only questions. Had the enemy been destroyed, or had they planted their seeds deeper in the marrow of truth? What had been won, and at what price? He carried within him a question that gnawed without answer. Was he the master of lies, or merely another pawn in a game older than the stars themselves? The silence of the void pressed heavily upon him. Behind, his warriors waited, their armor stained with soot, their faces unreadable. They had learned well the art of masks, for in this legion, trust was a fragile illusion. A captain approached, helm tucked beneath one arm, his voice low and steady. We've erased the last resistance, my lord. Nothing remains but silence. The words rang hollow, for Alpharius felt the absence as something heavier than victory. Silence was not peace. It was a wound, and wounds bled long after the blade was gone. He dismissed the captain with a nod, yet his mind lingered. They were masters of deception. Yes, but deception corrodes. What use was triumph if every comrade's hand might conceal a knife? Far above, ships drifted like corpses in orbit, their hulls lit faintly by the fading sun. Some bore the sigils of enemies, others of allies, though the distinction had long blurred. Alpharius closed his eyes and recalled the Emperor's face, once seen across the battlefield of Ulanor. A memory that should have inspired loyalty instead stirred unease. The Emperor's gaze had been a storm, contained in human form, yet even then, Alpharius had wondered if truth lay elsewhere. For what father builds sons only to hide truths from them? And what son, deceived, owes loyalty still? Betrayal was born in silence, nurtured in half words and shadows, until it grew into something that consumed both betrayer and betrayed. The Alpha Legion had always been more than soldiers. They were whispers in the halls of power, ghosts in the minds of their enemies, illusions conjured in firelight. But to live as a ghost is to forget the warmth of the living. Alpharius feared this most, that beneath the endless masks and strategies, something of himself had already withered. Did he serve the Emperor still? Did he serve chaos or the truth of some older force beyond comprehension? Or did he merely serve the war itself, that endless machine grinding stars into dust? He could not say, and perhaps that was the greatest deception of all. that he had deceived even himself. He walked the ruins, each step echoing through hollow halls, where once men cried victory and defeat. Statues had toppled, their faces shattered, yet among the fragments lay a single survivor, a child no older than 10, trembling beneath a broken wall. The boy's eyes widened at the sight of the armored giant, fear and wonder woven together. Alpharius paused, towering above him, the serpentine sigil glinting on his breastplate. Here was life in the midst of ruin. He could crush it, erase it, or spare it, and in that moment he felt the unbearable weight of choice. For what is empire but the accumulation of choices made in shadow? He turned away, leaving the boy to the ruins. Perhaps mercy, perhaps cruelty. The line was thin and thinner still in the Alpha Legion's creed. As he ascended to his waiting fleet, Alpharius thought of Omegon, his twin, his mirror, his other self. Were they two, or were they one? Did the galaxy know the difference, or did it matter? In the secrecy of his thoughts, Alpharius admitted his deepest fear, that even he did not know. If every truth has a twin, then what is truth but the mask we choose to wear? The ship's doors closed around him, sealing him once more in darkness. He felt the engines ignite, trembling like the heartbeat of a dying god, carrying them onward to another war, another deception, another ruin. The galaxy stretched before him, vast and endless, filled with enemies unseen and allies untrusted. He stared into the void and wondered if the Alpha Legion's greatest victory would not be in battle, but in erasure, in becoming so enmeshed in lies that no truth could ever be discerned again. The thought chilled him more than death, for death was an ending, but deception was eternal. A man could die, an empire could fall, but lies lingered long after bones had turned to dust. The silence of the dying sun followed them into the dark. Alpharius, or perhaps Omegon, allowed himself a final whisper, unheard by his legion. What am I, if not the shadow of my own lie? The stars gave no answer. Only the void remained, vast and unfeeling, its silence broken only by the slow thunder of engines carrying the legion deeper into a war without end. And so began the hidden wars, the battles fought in silence, where no truth could ever be trusted, and no victory would ever be free. The fleet drifted in silence, a serpent's coil of warships wrapped around the dim light of the ruined system. Their hulls reflected the faint glow of the dead star, metallic skin marked by scars of battle, each scar a story left untold. Within the flagship's depths, Alpharius walked the endless corridors, armored feet echoing in rhythm with the pulse of engines that seemed more alive than the men they carried. He passed his legionaries in silence, each one bowing slightly, but their eyes, what little could be seen through helm slits, spoke of doubt. Doubt was natural in the Alpha Legion, as common as breath, yet Alpharius felt its weight heavier now than in any war before. He wondered if their silence concealed respect or suspicion, for in this legion the difference was razor-thin. He entered the strategium, where holomaps flickered with fractured data, fragments of false reports stitched into patterns no truth could be gleaned from. Around the table stood his captains, men chosen for cunning rather than loyalty, for wit rather than devotion. Each bore their own secrets, some hidden within their armor, others etched into their eyes. One of them, Captain Myron, spoke first, his tone sharp as a blade. The Imperium believes this system destroyed by natural collapse. Their record keepers will not search. To them, this war never happened. He gestured at the ghostly star's dying light projected across the table. We have victory, my lord. Alpharius studied him, the words echoing hollow. Victory. How many times had he heard the word, dressed in different voices, wrapped in lies? Myron's face was calm, but Alpharius saw the tightening of his jaw, the flicker in his eyes. Victory meant little here. Survival was the only currency, and even survival seemed uncertain. Victory, Alpharius replied, his voice low, deliberate. Yet I wonder, whose victory? His words hung heavy in the air, and the captains shifted uneasily, some glancing at one another, some fixing their gaze on the floor. None dared answer, for in the Alpha Legion, every answer was a confession. Another voice broke the silence. Captain Lether, his armor still scorched from the battle. The Emperor's will is served. Our enemies vanish. Our brothers advance. He said it like a recited creed, a sentence repeated too many times to still carry belief. Alpharius watched him carefully. Lether had always been a man of rigid discipline, one who held to the illusion of loyalty even when loyalty was a shackle. Perhaps that was his mask. Perhaps beneath it was betrayal, waiting for the moment to strike. The Emperor's will, Alpharius murmured, not in agreement, not in denial, but with the faintest curve of irony in his voice. His eyes drifted across the holographic battlefield where pieces no longer moved. The game concluded, though the board remained. He dismissed the captains, one by one, their salutes mechanical, their departures cloaked in silence. Only Myron lingered, standing rigid, his voice lowered once the others had gone. Do you trust them, my lord? The question was sharp, dangerous, a blade unsheathed in darkness. Alpharius turned his gaze upon him, and for a moment the air itself seemed to still. Trust, he whispered. There is no trust, not here, not anywhere. Trust is the first lie. We speak of loyalty, but it is a shadow. We speak of truth, but it is a mask. What I trust is this. He tapped the table, where the holographic sun collapsed inward, becoming a black void that consumed everything around it. That all things fall. That is the only truth. Myron nodded slowly, but Alpharius caught the flicker of fear in his eyes. To fear truth was to fear nothingness, and the Alpha Legion was built upon both. Later, alone in his chamber, Alpharius removed his helm. The air was cold, metallic, carrying the scent of oil and ozone. His reflection in the obsidian wall seemed both familiar and foreign. Was it himself or Omegon? The thought haunted him as always. Perhaps his brother walked another ship, another war, at this very moment, speaking the same words, wearing the same face. Were they two beings, or one divided? If the Alpha Legion's creed was deception, then were they not the greatest deception of all, twin shadows masquerading as singular truth? His mind circled the thought, spiraling into doubt that gnawed like hunger. If even he could not discern himself from his brother, what hope had his legion to discern truth from lie? The chamber lights dimmed, shifting to a soft, unnatural glow. Alpharius closed his eyes and let silence press against him. In the silence, whispers emerged. Memory or hallucination, he could not tell. The Emperor's voice, commanding yet distant, echoing promises of unity. Horus' laughter before betrayal, ringing with pride. And quieter still, the faintest murmur, like a twin's voice in the back of his skull. Omegon, or perhaps only himself. You are not what you think, the whisper said. You are only the shadow of a greater game. He clenched his fists, the sound of ceramite grinding in the dark, yet he could not silence the voice. When dawn came, though in the void, dawn was but an illusion. The fleet prepared for translation into the warp. Alpharius stood once more before his warriors, their ranks lined in perfect order, their armor reflecting the dying light of the star behind them. He looked upon them and wondered what truths lived beneath those visors. Were they loyal? Were they traitors? Or were they merely waiting for orders? Masks behind masks. He felt the weight of their silence as a greater burden than any enemy's roar. Raising his gauntlet, he gave the order. Engines ignited, runes flared, and the fleet vanished into the sea of madness. The warp embraced them like a predator. Colors not meant for human eyes slithered across the void, and the hulls groaned under unseen currents. Alpharius felt it seep into him, that eternal question. Did he guide his legion, or was he guided by something else? In the shifting lights of the Imperium, he saw faces form and unform, allies, enemies, reflections of himself. Each one whispered the same word, betrayal. He whispered it back, a prayer, a curse, a truth. Betrayal was the blood in their veins, the heartbeat of the Alpha Legion, and it was only a matter of time before it came for him as well. When the warp calmed and real space returned, they emerged above another world, one marked for conquest. Its seas shimmered faintly beneath the sun, its cities alive with millions who had never heard the Alpha Legion's name. Alpharius stood upon the bridge, gazing down, knowing their lives would soon be unmade by shadows they would never see. His voice carried through the silence. Begin the operation. And so, the Legion descended, unseen serpents sliding into the heart of another world, carrying with them silence, deception, and the seeds of their own undoing. You said, continue the story and write chapter 3. Only. The chapter must be exactly 1,000 words, no more and no less. Follow and focus the command. Do not add any extra headings, summaries, or commentary. The tone should remain cinematic, immersive, and atmospheric, as if part of a film or audiobook narration. The writing must continue naturally from the previous chapters and stay fully aligned with the story's theme. Mark the chapter only with its number, and then give the narrative prose. There will be no headings in script and script in the form of paragraph focus on command. ChatGPT said, the world beneath them was not one of fire and steel, but of quiet oceans and silver coasts, its cities still unscarred by war. From orbit, it shimmered like a pearl against the void, a fragile beauty awaiting the serpent's fangs. Yet Alpharius did not order bombardment, nor did his warriors descend in thunder. The Alpha Legion never announced itself in flame. They seeped instead, as water through cracks, as shadows through keyholes, and the war began not with death, but with whispers. Ships disguised as merchant vessels drifted into harbors, their holds heavy not with goods, but with operatives whose armor lay hidden beneath civilian garb. Codes were spoken, names exchanged, and within weeks, the planet's hierarchies grew uncertain. Leaders questioned their own advisors. Advisors vanished, and new voices rose where old ones fell silent. The war was already unfolding, though no one named it such. Alpharius watched from the strategium as reports flickered across holoscreens, each one both truth and falsehood. In this theater, truth mattered less than perception. A single rumor could topple more than artillery. A whispered doubt could shatter more than orbital strikes. His captains sent updates in the form of contradictions. One claimed the governor was loyal. Another swore he plotted rebellion. A third insisted the governor was already dead. Alpharius sifted through them with a practiced calm, yet even he felt the unease coil in his mind. If all reports conflicted, did that mean the deception had succeeded? Or that even his own captains no longer knew what mask they wore? He leaned into the silence, searching for the shape of meaning, hidden in contradiction, but the silence gave no answers. Days stretched into weeks. The planet bent slowly, like metal under unseen pressure. Grain shipments were diverted to empty storehouses. Soldiers received orders signed by generals they never saw, and the people whispered of ghosts walking among them. At night, fires burned in the streets. Rebellion, some called it, though no banner was raised. In truth, it was the Legion's hand at work, invisible but crushing. Yet as Alpharius reviewed the progress, a thought gnawed. They could unmake this world with ease. But to what end? Was it loyalty to the Emperor that drove them, or another path only he and Omegon knew? The twin voices in his mind twisted the question. Sometimes he thought he heard his brother's breath just behind him, unseen, yet undeniable, whispering judgments in silence. Among his captains, dissent began to simmer. In a council aboard the flagship, Myron leaned across the table, his voice urgent. We could claim this world openly. Strike now, reveal ourselves, and none could resist. Why waste time in shadows? Opposite him, Letha's eyes burned cold. That is not our way. To strike openly is to abandon what we are. Shadows win where fire fails. Their gazes clashed, steel against steel, each certain of his truth. Alpharius let the silence linger, his own thoughts unraveling the threads. Both arguments held weight, yet neither answered the deeper question. What truth did he himself serve? He raised a hand, stilling the debate. We are serpents. Serpents do not roar. They coil, they constrict, and when the prey gasps its final breath, only then do they reveal themselves. His voice echoed across the chamber, final and sharp. Yet even as his captains bowed in agreement, Alpharius wondered if his words bound him or betrayed him. That night, alone again in his chamber, he stood before the obsidian wall, where his reflection shifted with the dim light. For a moment, the image moved without him. Another self, another twin, whose lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. He froze, breath caught, until the reflection aligned once more with his own motions. The thought lingered long after. Was it merely a trick of light, or Omegon's presence pressing from afar? He lay in the dark, armor set aside, and sleep came not as rest, but as fractured visions. He dreamed of the Emperor's hand reaching across the void, offering light, and of Horus's hand extended in shadow, offering freedom. Between them, Alpharius saw himself, divided into two, a reflection split, unable to choose. When he woke, the question burned in his throat. Could one twin betray while the other remained loyal? And would anyone ever know the difference? The next descent to the planet brought him to the heart of the storm he had sown. Disguised in the garb of a governor's aide, he walked among the halls of power unnoticed. His presence cloaked in subtle misdirection. The governor himself trembled behind locked doors. His counselors divided, some calling for imperial loyalty, others for secession, none realizing that both choices were traps laid by the same hand. Alpharius listened, watched, and felt the pulse of fear. He saw himself reflected in every man's doubt, every woman's whispered suspicion. They were all trapped in a maze of mirrors, and he was the architect of that maze, though even he wondered if some unseen hand had built it first. As he left the chamber, a voice called softly from the shadows. A boy, no older than the one he had spared on the ruined world, stood in the corridor, eyes wide, unblinking. You don't belong here, the boy said, voice steady despite his youth. Alpharius paused, towering over him. And what makes you so certain? He asked. The child's gaze did not waver. Because you are two, and one of you is lying. The words struck him like a blade, cutting deeper than any enemy could. He reached for the boy, but in that instant the child was gone, the corridor empty, as if the words had been spoken by the void itself. Alpharius stood in silence, the echo lingering like a wound. When he returned to the fleet, the planet already teetered on the brink of collapse, its leaders paralyzed, its armies turning inward. Victory was assured, yet Alpharius felt none of its weight. Instead, he carried the boy's words like a secret brand upon his soul. 2, and one of you is lying. Was it him? Was it Omegon? Or was it the truth itself, fractured beyond repair? He gazed out upon the void, where the stars burned cold and distant, and wondered if perhaps the galaxy itself whispered the same accusation. Shadows lengthened, the serpent's coils tightened, and still he could not escape the sense that the greatest war was not fought in the stars, but within his own reflection. The planet fell without the thunder of orbital fire or the clash of massed armies. It collapsed like a tower of glass, struck not by force but by whispers. Within a month, the governor vanished, his palace consumed in flames whose origin none could name. Generals marched against their own men, convinced of betrayal where none had been proven. Administrators disappeared, their names erased from records as if they had never lived at all. By the time the Alpha Legion revealed themselves, there was nothing left to oppose them. Cities opened their gates to spectres, to masks, to the serpents who had already been living among them. The Legion marched not into battle, but into a graveyard of lies they themselves had sown, and Alpharius stood at the heart of it, watching his victory unfold, as though it were the performance of a play written long before his birth. The populace bent the knee, some out of fear, others out of confusion, unable to discern who their masters had been, who they were now, and who they might be tomorrow. Alpharius walked among them, cloaked in silence, his towering frame disguised behind layers of subtle distortion. No one knew him, yet all bowed. He thought of the child's words on the world before, 2 and 1 is lying, and in every bent back, every lowered gaze, he saw the truth of that riddle. These people, bound by their fear, had become as fractured as he. Each one wore a mask, pretending loyalty, pretending belief, yet none of it was real. He wondered if that was all an empire ever became, a masquerade where the masks eventually forgot they were masks at all. In the strategium above, his captains debated their next steps, voices sharp and wary. Myron argued for integration, to bend the planet's industry to their cause, and fortify the system against retribution. Lethar countered with precision, insisting the world be left hollow, stripped of resources, then abandoned before the Imperium's gaze could turn here. Others muttered of chaos whispers, of offers from beyond the veil, voices carried through the warp promising power if they pledged. Alpharius listened to them circle like carrion birds, each tearing at the same carcass from different angles. Their words swirled around him, yet he heard something beneath them, something quieter, the tremor of doubt in every voice. They did not trust each other. They did not trust him. Perhaps they never had. He raised a hand, and the chamber fell silent. His voice emerged low, weighted, carrying across the flickering light of the hollow table. This world is not ours to keep. It is ours to erase. The Imperium will see rebellion here, not conquest. When they come, they will find ashes and shadows, not truth. That is our war. He met each captain's gaze, one by one, and saw the flickers of agreement, of hesitation, of resentment. Myron's jaw tightened, but he bowed his head. Lethar gave no sign, his face carved from stone. Alpharius turned away before they could see the conflict within his own eyes. Night fell upon the conquered world, though night, in truth, was a veil of smoke and fire. Alpharius descended alone into the capital's ruins, cloaked in shifting light that masked his form. He walked streets where walls still smoldered, where survivors whispered prayers to gods who would never answer. He saw the faces of mothers clutching children, of men staring at the ground as if to find meaning in dirt. In their eyes, he saw only confusion, not hatred, not loyalty, just the emptiness of those who no longer believed in anything at all. For a moment, he envied them. To no longer believe might be freedom. To live in emptiness might be a release from the burden of truth. He passed through the wreckage and entered what remained of the governor's palace. There, in the shattered throne room, a single body still sat upright among the ash, burned but intact enough to recognize the insignia of command. The governor's final act, Alpharius knew, had been to sit upon his throne as it burned, unwilling to flee, unwilling to kneel. There was a strange dignity in it, a dignity the Alpha Legion's lies could never erase. Alpharius reached out, brushing the charred remains of the man's hand, and for the briefest instant felt the weight of it all. Was this victory, truly? Or was it only another layer of betrayal? Betrayal of those who had fought, those who had believed, those who had no choice. His reflection shimmered faintly on the polished marble, distorted by smoke. And again he thought he saw another face, his twin's face, smiling faintly, as if mocking him. He turned away. When he returned to the fleet, the preparations for departure had already begun. Entire districts were set to burn, archives erased, populations displaced and scattered, so that no record of what had happened here could remain. Myron approached him with measured steps, voice kept low but edged with steel. "My lord, there is talk among the men. They wonder where we go, why we do what we do. They fight in shadows, and yet they do not see the shape of the war itself. They wonder if even you know." Alpharius regarded him in silence, the words striking deeper than Myron could know. Did even he know? The twin voices in his head offered no clarity, only the endless echo of contradiction. "Let them wonder," Alpharius said at last, his voice colder than he intended. "Doubt is their weapon as much as it is mine. To question is to sharpen the blade. Those who seek truth will find it, though perhaps they will not survive it." Myron bowed, but the flicker of suspicion in his eyes did not fade. Alpharius watched him go, wondering if he had just planted another betrayal, another seed that would grow in silence until it strangled him. The fleet burned its trail into the void once more, the planet left behind as a hollow carcass, its name destined to fade from records. From the bridge, Alpharius watched the shrinking orb, its oceans glimmering faintly one last time before warp swallowed it whole. The crew moved around him, silent, efficient, faceless. He imagined each one carrying a secret order, a hidden allegiance, a knife tucked behind every oath. The Alpha Legion was victory in shadows, but shadows had no loyalty. They only shifted, lengthened, and consumed. In the warp's embrace, Alpharius sat alone, his thoughts circling back to the boy's words, to the governor's burned throne, to the suspicion in Myron's eyes. He closed his own and whispered, "Not to gods, not to men, but to the void itself. Am I myself, or am I already the lie I built?" The warp offered no answer, only the faint ripple of laughter, or perhaps an echo of his twin. And so the serpent coiled tighter, its own body constricting around itself as the hidden wars pressed onward, consuming truth, consuming loyalty, leaving only silence in their wake. The warp released the fleet into the cold light of another system, a place unnamed upon imperial charts, its sun pale and flickering, its planets little more than hollowed stones turning endlessly in silence. Yet it was here that Alpharius ordered the fleet to pause, to gather in stillness before the next shadowed war. The ships hung against the stars' dim glow, like steel serpents coiled in patience, and within the flagship's depths, the atmosphere grew thick with unease. Soldiers whispered in mess halls, voices low and urgent, questioning not the orders, but the purpose behind them. Their victories left no trophies, no banners, only ruins, erased from records and enemies that no one else remembered fighting. They were shadows, winning wars in silence, and silence weighed upon them heavier than chains. Alpharius walked the length of the ship in those days, unseen but ever present, his presence cloaked so that he could watch his warriors without their knowledge. He heard them speak when they thought themselves alone. Some spoke of loyalty to the emperor, others muttered of Horus, and still others whispered names far older, names that carried the taste of the warp. What struck him most was not what they said, but how uncertain they sounded, as though each word was chosen without belief. Doubt had spread through the legion like a sickness, and in its reflection, Alpharius saw his own thoughts mirrored back at him. If he could not hold truth within himself, how could he expect his legion to bear it? The captains gathered again in council, the chamber dim, save for the glow of star maps drifting above the table. Myron spoke with sharp conviction, his words cutting through the gloom. Our men lose faith. They fight wars that cannot be named, bleed for victories that are never recorded. They wonder if they are pawns in some greater design. He glanced at Alpharius then, a flicker of challenge in his eyes. Do we serve the Emperor, or have we become his enemy? The Legion deserves to know. A silence fell, and Lethar broke it, his voice low, filled with steel. The Legion deserves nothing but orders. We are serpents. Our fangs sink in silence. What matters is not the why, but the strike itself. His gaze lingered on Myron, cold and unwavering, and tension filled the room like smoke. Alpharius let them argue, their voices rising, each insisting on truth, but none daring to call it their own. He stood at the edge of their conflict, a shadow within shadows, until at last he spoke. Truth is not ours to possess. Truth is a weapon to be wielded, shaped, turned against our enemies. To seek it for its own sake is folly. We are not seekers of truth. We are its deceivers, its destroyers. His words rang heavy, final, and the captains bowed their heads, but he saw the doubt remain in their eyes. Even as they obeyed, they did not believe. Perhaps they never would. Later, alone in his chamber, Alpharius removed his helm and stared once more into the obsidian wall. His reflection stared back, and again it shifted, as though another face lay just behind it. The twins' smile flickered faintly, patient, knowing. He pressed his hand against the surface, cold stone against armored gauntlet, and whispered, "Are you here?" No answer came, only the echo of his own voice, and yet the silence felt full, as though someone listened from within the dark. He thought of Omegon constantly, not as brother, but as phantom, a presence both real and imagined. Perhaps Omegon watched him now from another ship, another war, or perhaps the reflection itself had grown into something independent, a ghost born of his own doubt. He could not tell. When the Legion descended upon the next world, they found not defiance, but welcome. The people opened their gates eagerly, offering food, shelter, even allegiance, though they knew nothing of who these warriors truly were. They had lived too long under the threat of Xenos raiders and were grateful for any savior, even serpents cloaked in lies. Alpharius stood among their leaders, in disguise, listening as they pledged loyalty to banners they had never seen, to oaths they did not understand. Their words were warm, filled with hope, but to Alpharius they sounded hollow as his own legion's voices. He wondered if all loyalty was only this, an act of desperation, a mask painted over fear. In the night, he walked the streets unseen, cloaked in distortion, and watched as the people celebrated, believing themselves freed. He saw children laugh, elders weep, and men lift cups in honor of ghosts. He wondered what they would think when their names vanished from history, when their banners were burned, when the Imperium arrived to find nothing but ashes. Would they curse him? Would they even remember him? Or would they vanish like all the rest, swallowed by silence? The thought gnawed at him, sharp and merciless. He who had sworn to deceive now longed for some measure of truth, some certainty that all this shadow had meaning. Yet the only certainty was betrayal, and betrayal was endless. On the third night, he met with his captains in secret. The council gathered not upon the flagship, but in the ruins of an abandoned citadel. The air was cold, heavy with dust. Myron spoke first, his voice low, urgent. "We cannot continue like this. The Legion fractures, men whisper against each other. If we do not give them clarity, they will make their own." Lether's eyes burned, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. Clarity is weakness. Secrecy is strength. If they falter, let them fall. The Legion does not need the weak. The two men's gazes locked, a spark of violence shimmering in the air, and Alpharius felt the tension coil tighter than any serpent's grip. He raised his voice, calm but heavy. "You speak of clarity, of strength, of truth, yet none of these matter. What matters is survival. What matters is the war that stretches beyond us, beyond even the Emperor or Horus. A war of time itself, of lies older than stars. We are not loyal. We are not traitors. We are the knife in the dark, the shadow that cuts both ways. Remember that." His words silenced them, but in the silence he heard the echo of a fracture, the promise that one day these captains, these brothers, would turn their knives not outward, but inward. When he returned to the flagship, he stood once more before the void. Stars burned faintly, distant, indifferent. He thought of the boy's voice, of the governor's burned throne, of Myron's defiance, of Lether's cold fury. They swirled within him like fragments of a shattered mirror, each piece reflecting a different truth. He closed his eyes and whispered to the silence, "If betrayal is inevitable, let it be mine first." The void offered no answer, only the faint shimmer of unseen laughter, or perhaps the whisper of his twin waiting in the dark. And the serpent coiled tighter still, its body knotting upon itself, as the hidden wars deepened and truth slipped further away into silence. The world that welcomed them burned just as quickly as all the others, though the flames this time rose not from bombardment but from the hearts of its people. It began with whispers that spread through the cities like sickness, that their new saviors were not who they claimed, that behind their masks and their borrowed oaths lurked monsters in human guise. Some swore they had seen the warriors' faces shift in shadow, changing from one man to another in the blink of an eye. Others spoke of voices echoing in their sleep, whispers that told them their loyalty meant nothing, that they would vanish like all the rest. Fear took root, and fear grew teeth. By the time Alpharius walked the avenues cloaked in disguise, the people no longer celebrated. They stared at the ground when the Legion passed, their silence heavy, their loyalty unraveling thread by thread. Alpharius stood among his captains in the heart of the occupied palace, watching the flames from the high windows. Masirin's voice was taut with anger. "They will rise against us. Not openly, not at first, but it will come. And when it comes, it will cost us more than shadows can bear. Lether folded his arms, unshaken. Then let them rise. Fear is a weapon sharper than any blade. Their defiance will wither when their children starve, when their homes collapse, when their own whispers betray them. Their eyes met again, hard as iron, and Alpharius felt the weight of their words coil around him. One saw rebellion as a wound to excise, the other as a tool to wield. He wondered which was true, or if truth had any place in their war at all. Later, when the council dispersed, Alpharius remained alone, staring at the smoke curling into the night sky. He thought of the boy's words on the ruined world. 2, and 1 is lying. And he wondered if perhaps the people here saw clearer than his own legion. To them, every mask was a threat, every silence a betrayal. They had no need of grand strategies to know they were trapped in a war without meaning. He envied their clarity, even if it was born of fear. For him, clarity never came. He felt always divided, as though each step he took was mirrored by another unseen self, walking a different path, serving a different master, perhaps Omegon, perhaps no one at all. In the following days, resistance flared in small bursts. Supply convoys vanished into forests, their guards found dead with their own weapons turned against them. Messages meant for the legion's ears only appeared in the mouths of civilians, their secrets betrayed by invisible hands. Myron insisted there was a traitor among them, someone feeding truth into the cracks of their lies. Lether countered that no traitor was needed, that the people themselves had simply learned the Alpha Legion's art. Alpharius listened and said nothing, though in his silence he wondered if both were true. Betrayal did not need to be taught. It was as natural as breathing when trust was gone. One night, he descended into the city cloaked in distortion, walking the narrow alleys where soldiers whispered and civilians vanished into shadows. He sought not battle, but understanding, though he did not name it so. In a courtyard, he found a group gathered around a fire, their faces sharp with fear and defiance. One spoke. "They wear masks, but masks cannot last forever. When they fall, we will remember who we are." Alpharius stood unseen at the edge of the light, hearing their voices as if they spoke to him directly. He felt a pull in his chest, a weight he could not name. He could have ended them all with a thought, silenced their defiance, yet he turned away. Their words lingered, heavier than the sound of any blade. When he returned to the flagship, the warp was restless, pressing against the ship's hull like a tide eager to devour. In his chamber, Alpharius sat before the obsidian wall, his reflection distorted by the flickering lights. This time the twin smile was clearer, sharper, as if Omegon himself stared back from within the stone. "You cannot hold them," the reflection whispered, though no sound left its lips. "They are serpents too, and serpents always bite their master." Alpharius closed his eyes, the words echoing in his skull. He could no longer tell if they were his thoughts or another's intrusion. Perhaps there was no difference. The next council erupted into open division. Myron accused one of the lesser captains of betrayal, claiming his orders had led to the loss of an entire cohort in the southern cities. The accused denied it, with equal fervor, swearing he had obeyed to the letter. Lether intervened, his blade half drawn, his voice colder than void. "Perhaps we should carve the truth from his flesh. Perhaps only then will the Legion learn what loyalty means." The chamber fell into chaos, voices rising, hands reaching for blades, and Alpharius stood in the center, silent, watching his Legion fracture before his eyes. He raised his hand at last, and his voice cut through the storm like steel. Enough. We are shadows. We do not fight each other where enemies can see. The knife you turn inward weakens us all. His words carried authority, but not belief. He saw it in their eyes. The doubt, the hunger, the unspoken thought that perhaps the knife inward was inevitable. That night, Alpharius dreamed again. He stood upon a battlefield not yet fought, bodies scattered like broken stars, his legion lying among them, their armor shattered, their masks torn away. At the center, he saw himself, or perhaps Omegon, kneeling, a blade driven through his chest. He could not tell if it was his own hand that held the blade or his brother's. He woke in silence, the dream clinging like frost. And for the first time in centuries, he felt the weight of mortality press against him. Immortality was not safety. It was a curse to watch betrayal unfold forever, until it finally consumed even the betrayer. When dawn came, or what passed for dawn beneath the pale star, Alpharius gathered his legion and gave the order to abandon the world. "Leave nothing behind," he commanded, his voice steady though his heart wavered. "Erase every trace. When the Imperium comes, they will find only silence." The legion obeyed, but not with unity. Some moved with zeal, others with hesitation, and Alpharius felt the fracture widen with every step. The people of the world watched as the serpents departed, their faces unreadable, their silence heavier than curses. As the fleet tore into the warp once more, Alpharius stood alone upon the bridge, staring into the void. The pale star shrank behind him, fading into darkness, and he felt the serpent coil tighter around his own throat. He whispered into the silence, his voice barely audible even to himself. "If betrayal must come, let it find me first. Let it end this shadow." No answer came, only the hum of engines and the echo of his twin's smile, lingering in the dark glass of his thoughts. And so the hidden wars pressed on, each victory another fracture, each silence another weight, until even Alpharius could no longer tell whether he commanded the shadows or was already their prisoner. The warp spat the fleet into the cold dark of another system, its sun a swollen red wound, bleeding light across barren worlds. The ships hung motionless, their hulls scarred from unseen currents, their silence thicker than ever. Alpharius stood upon the bridge, staring into the crimson glow, his mind caught between stillness and storm. Around him, his legion moved with precision, yet he felt the tension ripple beneath their discipline. Orders were obeyed, voices hushed, but each step echoed with suspicion. He could sense it in the way captains glanced at one another, in the way warriors stood too rigidly at attention. The legions still obeyed, but the fracture widened with each breath, and Alpharius knew it. Reports arrived of movements in the wider war, of Horus rallying fleets, of loyalist worlds burning, of brothers dividing into enemies. Yet these messages were fragments, some true, some false, and the Alpha Legion thrived on uncertainty. To them, even reality had become a weapon, sharpened by lies. Still, Alpharius felt the weight of decision pressing against him. The galaxy tore itself apart, and he could no longer remain only a serpent in shadow. A choice loomed, vast and unavoidable, though choice itself felt like another deception waiting to be unmasked. That night, he summoned his captains. They gathered in the strategium, their armor gleaming faintly in the blood-red light of the star. Myron spoke first, his voice sharp with urgency. "We cannot linger in silence any longer. The Imperium collapses, the traitors rise, and the galaxy burns. We must choose a side before we are swallowed by indecision. If we strike for the Emperor, we may yet preserve order. If we turn to Horus, we gain the chance to shape the new age. But to remain in shadow is to wither. His eyes burned with conviction, and for a moment Alpharius almost envied him. Letha's reply was colder, measured. Sides are illusions. Both Emperor and War Master see only their own ends. To bind ourselves to either is to become their pawns. We are serpents, and serpents survive not by choosing masters, but by striking when least expected. His words hung in the air, sharp as glass, and Alpharius saw the flicker of agreement in some eyes, doubt in others. The chamber thickened with tension, as though every word carried the weight of betrayal yet to come. Alpharius listened in silence, his gaze shifting between them. Myron's hunger for clarity, Letha's devotion to ambiguity. They were not enemies, yet their truths opposed each other. He felt himself split between them, torn like a reflection across shattered glass. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, deliberate. We are Alpha Legion. We are not loyalists nor traitors. We are the shadow between. His words carried across the room, yet he saw no relief in their faces, only deeper doubt. For even as he declared it, he felt the uncertainty gnaw at his own heart. Could a legion survive between? Or was the shadow only another form of death? When the council ended, Alpharius walked alone through the ship's silent halls. The steel beneath his boots vibrated faintly with the hum of engines, but the silence pressed closer than sound. He felt eyes upon him, though the corridors were empty. In polished steel panels, he caught glimpses of his own reflection, and once more, it moved not as he moved. His twin stared back, the faintest curl of a smile upon his lips. Alpharius paused, breath caught, and whispered, "Are you there, Omegon?" The reflection gave no answer, yet its silence was heavier than words. Perhaps his brother walked another ship, another war, or perhaps the reflection itself had grown into its own truth. He turned away, but the echo followed him like a shadow he could not escape. On the surface of the Red Star's third planet lay ruins older than the Imperium, structures carved into stone so weathered it seemed born from the rock itself. Alpharius descended with a small retinue, cloaked in distortion, their presence hidden even from the air itself. The ruins whispered of civilizations erased, their names forgotten, their truths buried. Alpharius walked through halls lined with symbols no one living could read, yet he felt them stir something in him, a sense of design, of manipulation older than mankind. His hand brushed a wall, and beneath the stone he felt an energy pulse, faint, ancient, like the heartbeat of a god long dead. For a moment he thought of the Necron tombs, of the old ones, of forces beyond Emperor and War Master. The galaxy was older than both, and its true war might not even have begun. That night, in the shadow of those ruins, Alpharius dreamed again. He saw himself standing in two places at once, on the Emperor's side, fighting for unity, on Horus's side, tearing that unity apart. He saw himself crowned in victory, and he saw himself struck down by his own legion's blades. He saw Omegon watching from the shadows, face unreadable, as if to say, all paths are the same, all endings predetermined. He woke with a start, the dream's weight clinging to him like chains, and he wondered if choice itself was an illusion, if the Alpha Legion's fate had been written before their birth. Back aboard the flagship, Myron confronted him privately, his voice tight with restrained fury. They will not follow silence forever. They need clarity. They need to know what we are fighting for. Alpharius regarded him, his face unreadable. And if I told them, would they believe? If I said we serve the Emperor, would they trust it? If I said we serve Horus, would they not think it another mask? Truth has no meaning among us, Myron. only the lie remains. Myron's jaw tightened, his silence sharp as accusation, and Alpharius felt the weight of his doubt like a knife pressing against his back. As the fleet prepared to move again, Alpharius stood upon the bridge, gazing into the crimson star. He thought of the ruins, of the dreams, of his captain's divisions, of the legion's whispers. He felt the serpent coil tighter within him, constricting his own breath. He whispered to himself, though the words tasted bitter. "We are Alpha Legion. We are all things. We are nothing." His reflection in the viewport seemed to smile faintly back at him, and he wondered once more if the smile was his or his brother's. The order was given. The fleet turned, engines igniting, shadows sliding into the dark. The crimson star dwindled behind them, its light fading into the void. Ahead lay another world, another war, another deception waiting to be woven. Yet Alpharius felt the fracture widening, the serpent tightening, the war within his own soul rising to eclipse all others. And in the silence of the void, he knew the greatest enemy the Alpha Legion faced was not the Imperium, nor Horus, nor even the gods of the warp. It was themselves. The void swallowed the fleet as it pushed deeper into uncharted dark, the stars thinning until even their faint light seemed reluctant to follow. Alpharius stood in silence upon the flagship's bridge, the blackness pressing against the viewport like a living thing. Around him, the crew moved with quiet precision, but he felt their unease as keenly as his own heartbeat. They were warriors bred for deception, trained to survive in shadows, yet now the shadow itself felt too vast, too consuming. Doubt hung over them like a shroud, thickening with every new silence, every unspoken question. Alpharius remained outwardly calm, but inside he felt the serpent tighten its coils. He wondered if even he knew where the fleet was going, or if the decision had been made long ago, and he was only walking its inevitable path. He summoned his captains once more, though he already knew what storm awaited. They came armored, faces hidden, their voices sharpened by division. Myron spoke with fire in his eyes, his words carrying the hunger of a man who had lost patience with endless shadow. The galaxy burns, and we drift in silence. Horus rises, and the Emperor clings to the ashes of his empire. Still we do nothing. Still we vanish into ruins and leave only silence. The Legion must stand for something, or it will collapse into nothing. His voice carried across the chamber, and Alpharius felt the ripple it caused. Men shifting, hands tightening around weapons, eyes narrowing as though each waited for betrayal to break into flesh. Lether answered, cold and unyielding. "We are not like the others. We do not wear banners, nor kneel to masters. To choose is to become a pawn, to surrender the only power we have. Shadows serve no one. The Legion lives because no one knows its truth. Strip that away, and we are no more than another army doomed to die in another man's war." His words fell like iron, but the chamber remained restless, torn between clarity and secrecy, loyalty and betrayal. Alpharius felt himself standing between them as he always had, reflection split, truth fractured. He raised his hand, stilling the storm. "We are Alpha Legion. We are the knife unseen, the shadow between. We will not be bound to Emperor nor War Master. We will walk where others cannot, and in the end, when they fall, we will remain." His voice carried weight, but not conviction. He saw it in their eyes. They did not believe. They would obey, yes, but belief had already fled, and perhaps it had fled from him as well. That night, Alpharius walked the dark corridors of the flagship alone. The air was heavy with oil and silence. the hum of engines the only sound. He passed warriors who straightened at his approach, their visors hiding their eyes, their salutes sharp and hollow. He wondered what they whispered when he was gone, what suspicions they traded in the silence of their barracks. Were they still his legion, or had the serpent already devoured itself from within? He paused before a steel wall, its surface polished enough to catch his reflection. Once more, it did not move as he did. Omegon's face stared back, a faint smile curving his lips, and Alpharius felt the cold certainty that his brother was near, though near might mean 100 systems away, or only within his own fractured mind. In the weeks that followed, the fleet made contact with a world on the edge of the Imperium, its governors torn between loyalty to terror and whispers of Horus's promises. Alpharius chose subtlety, as always. Operatives descended disguised as emissaries, whispering lies into ears already heavy with fear. The people turned against their leaders before the first blade was drawn. Rebellion flared, swift and silent, and the legion moved unseen through the chaos, guiding every hand without revealing their own. By the time the smoke cleared, the world no longer knew who had commanded them, or whether they had ever chosen at all. It was victory, precise and clean, but Alpharius felt no triumph. He walked the ruined streets, watching people kneel before shadows, and he thought of the governor who had burned upon his throne, of the boy who had whispered truth into silence. Each victory left him emptier, each deception heavier. Myron approached him on the surface, his voice tight with suppressed anger. This is hollow. They do not know who rules them, only that their rulers vanished. They do not honor us, nor the emperor, nor even Horus. They honor no one. What is left in such a world? Alpharius regarded him, his gaze unreadable. What is left, he said softly, is silence. Silence endures longer than loyalty, and in silence we win. Myron shook his head, and Alpharius saw the fracture deepen in his eyes. He wondered if the man's silence afterward would one day break into betrayal. When night fell, Alpharius dreamt again. He stood on a battlefield that stretched across stars, his legions scattered on both sides, some crying the emperor's name, others shouting Horus. In the center, he stood facing himself, two reflections locked in mirrored stances, each holding a blade. Around them the galaxy burned, but neither struck, for neither knew which was the truth. He woke with the taste of ash in his mouth, his body trembling, though his armor had never moved. For the first time, he admitted to himself that perhaps there was no truth, no side to choose, only mirrors reflecting, endlessly until nothing remained. The fleet departed before Imperial forces could respond, vanishing back into the void. In the strategium, Alpharius studied the star maps, their shifting light painting his armor in ghostly hues. He thought of his captains, of Myron's hunger, of Lethar's cold resolve, of the whispers in the barracks. He thought of Omegon's face, smiling faintly from every reflection. Watching him with patient silence, he whispered into the dark, "If betrayal must come, let it be mine first. Let it end with me." The words vanished into silence, swallowed by the hum of the ship, and he wondered if his brother had heard them, or if only the void had listened. When the next orders were given, the legion moved with perfect precision, but Alpharius felt the truth beneath their discipline. The Alpha Legion was fracturing. Each victory and shadow cut deeper into their unity. Each deception tightened the serpent's coils until even he could no longer breathe. As the fleet drifted once more into the black, Alpharius stood alone at the viewport, staring into the endless dark. The stars flickered faintly, their light fragile, their silence eternal. He thought of empires rising and falling, of brothers dividing into enemies, of masks worn until they became the face itself. And in that silence, he knew the truth he could never speak aloud. The Alpha Legion's greatest war was not against the Imperium, nor against Horus, nor even against the gods. It was against itself, and in that war there could be no victory. Only endless shadows devouring one another until nothing remained. The void carried them further into silence, the fleet trailing through corridors of stars as though lost in a labyrinth without walls. Alpharius watched from the bridge, his face hidden within his helm, though he knew the men around him still studied him when they thought his gaze elsewhere. Their obedience was precise, their discipline immaculate, but beneath it lay a restlessness that grew louder with every passing moment. He felt it in the silence between orders, in the stiffness of salutes, in the way voices lowered when he passed. Doubt had become their language, and suspicion its echo. Even here, in the emptiness between suns, the Legion carried the weight of unseen knives. Reports reached him in fragments, loyalist fleets gathering near Ultramar, traitor legions carving bloody paths across Segmentum Solar, names of worlds lost, of brothers fallen, of oaths broken. Each report contradicted the next, none entirely trusted, yet all believable. That was the nature of this war. Truth itself had become another battlefield. And though the Alpha Legion had mastered the art of shadows, Alpharius felt the ground slipping even beneath his own feet. For if truth was a weapon, then wielding it too long meant becoming its prey. Myron came to him in private, his voice taut with urgency. The men whisper that you keep them from choosing because you fear the answer. They say Omegon has already chosen, that you follow a path not your own. The words struck like a blade, though Alpharius gave no sign. He regarded Myron in silence, the captain's face half lit by the dim glow of the strategium. "And what do you believe?" Alpharius asked at last, his voice calm, though inside the serpent twisted tighter. Myron's jaw set. "I believe they deserve truth, even if it kills them. A legion cannot march on silence forever." Alpharius dismissed him with a nod, but the words lingered like ash in his thoughts. Letha's counsel came not long after, colder, more calculated. Do not bend to their weakness. Truth will not save them. It will destroy them. Keep them in shadow, my lord, and they will remain yours. To grant them clarity is to break them. His voice was iron, unyielding, but Alpharius heard the same hunger beneath it, the same concealed doubt. Both Myron and Letha spoke in absolutes, yet both carried betrayal within their tongues. He knew it, and still he listened, because perhaps betrayal was the only truth left. The fleet made anchor above a dead world, its surface cracked and barren, its atmosphere thin and cold. Alpharius descended alone, wrapped in distortion, to walk among ruins that time itself had abandoned. Towers broken to their foundations jutted like bones from the earth. Symbols long erased marked the stones, their meanings lost, but their weight undeniable. He walked in silence, hearing only the whisper of wind across dust, and for a moment he felt the presence of those who had walked here before. Civilizations erased, empires forgotten, warriors buried beneath sands that remembered nothing. He touched a fragment of carved stone, its surface etched with shapes half familiar, and wondered if even the Alpha Legion would one day be reduced to this. Shadows remembered only as rumor, names scattered into dust. That night, the dreams came stronger. He saw his legion gathered on a battlefield, half turning toward the Emperor, half toward Horus, their blades raised against one another. He saw himself standing in the center, torn into two, one hand reaching for light, the other for shadow, and always, beyond the smoke, Omegon watching, silent, his face unreadable. When Alpharius awoke, he did not know if the dream had been his own or if his twin had placed it there. Perhaps they were no longer separate at all, only two halves of one endless deception. When he returned to the flagship, he found unrest already brewing. A skirmish had broken out between two cohorts, each accusing the other of false orders. Blood had been spilled, not by the enemy, but by brothers in the same colours. The bodies were removed quickly, but the wound remained, and Alpharius knew it would spread. He assembled the captains in the strategium, their armour still bearing traces of the conflict. His voice was calm, but his words carried weight. You fight each other, as though the enemy lies within. Perhaps you are right, but remember this. If you strike in shadow, strike with purpose. To kill without reason is to die without meaning. His eyes swept over them, and he saw defiance in Myron, cold calculation in Lether, unease in the others. He dismissed them, but the silence they left behind felt heavier than the meeting itself. That same evening, he walked the ship's corridors alone, the whispers of his legion echoing faintly. He paused before another polished panel, and once again the reflection shifted. His twin's face stared back, the faintest smile on his lips, eyes filled with something Alpharius could not name. He whispered into the silence, "Tell me, brother, which of us is true? Which of us is the lie?" The reflection did not answer, but the smile lingered, as though the question itself was meaningless. He turned away, yet felt the weight of that silent gaze pressing against him long after. The next day, the fleet received a transmission, fragmented and distorted, but clear enough to pierce the silence. A call to arms, a summons to war. Horus gathering his sons, the Emperor rallying his defenders, the galaxy itself choosing sides. The captains brought it to Alpharius, their voices restless, their eyes sharp with demand. Myron spoke with urgency. The time is here. We must choose. To stand between is to be crushed by both. Lether countered, cold as ever. To choose is to betray ourselves. We endure by deception, not allegiance. Their voices rose, clashing like steel, and Alpharius stood between them, his silence deeper than their fury. He felt the legion's gaze upon him, hundreds of eyes waiting, hundreds of doubts coiling into knives. At last, he raised his hand, and the chamber fell still. His voice was low, steady, though each word weighed like stone. We are Alpha Legion. We do not choose. We are the choice itself. We are the shadow that makes all sides doubt. Remember this. When history is written, they will not know if we stood for Emperor or War Master. They will only know that we were there, unseen, guiding, betraying, surviving. His words rang across the chamber, but he knew belief did not follow them. He saw it in their eyes. The fracture had deepened too far. Obedience remained, but loyalty had withered. When the council ended, Alpharius remained alone, staring into the star maps. He thought of his brother, of the dreams, of the ruins, of the whispers in the halls. He thought of empires rising and falling, of truth erased by silence. And he whispered, so softly, even he barely heard it, "If betrayal is the only truth, then let me carry it. Let it end with me." But the void gave no answer, only the endless hum of the ship and the faint, unseen smile of his twin lingering in the dark. The fleet drifted at the edge of an unlit system. Its sun collapsed long ago, leaving only the faint shimmer of a black hole devouring the remnants of light. The ship circled in silence, as if drawn to the emptiness itself, the gravity of a star that had already died. Alpharius stood upon the bridge, watching the distortion ripple across the void, and felt a strange kinship with it. to devour and remain unseen, to bend perception until truth itself faltered. This was the essence of the Alpha Legion. Yet the black hole was no victor. It consumed endlessly, yet in the end, it too would fade. The thought lingered in him like a prophecy he dared not voice. The Legion stirred uneasily. Word had spread of the transmission from the wider war. Some believed they had already chosen Horus in secret. Others swore Alpharius remained true to the Emperor. Both beliefs were lies, and both carried truth. The halls of the flagship echoed with whispers, rumors shifting like smoke, accusations muttered behind closed doors. Alpharius let them spread, for in silence lies grew stronger than commands. Yet he felt the serpent constrict further with every turn. A legion united by deception might endure, but a legion divided by doubt would destroy itself without ever needing an enemy. In the strategium, Myron pressed his demand again, his voice sharpened to steel. The galaxy does not wait. Horus will not pause for us to decide, nor will the Emperor. If we remain between, both will strike us. Already the men question which shadow they fight for. Already blood has been spilled. His hand clenched on the edge of the table, his eyes locked on Alpharius, as though to wrest an answer from him. Letha's reply came with the same cold certainty as ever. The moment we choose, we cease to be Alpha Legion. The knife in shadow becomes a pawn on a board. We win not by sides, but by confusion. Let them believe we serve both. Let them never know. His voice was calm, but his hand rested near his blade, a silent warning to any who might oppose. Alpharius let the silence stretch, the weight of their words settling into the chamber. He could hear the breath of every captain, the faint hum of the machines around them, the tension so sharp it threatened to shatter. At last, he spoke. We will move as shadow commands. We will answer neither and both. When Horus calls, we will answer. When the Emperor demands, we will appear. And when the war ends, whichever side stands will remember us as theirs. That is our victory. Not banners, not loyalty, only survival. His words rang through the chamber like judgment. Some bowed their heads in reluctant obedience. Others exchanged looks heavy with unspoken thought. Myron's jaw tightened. Letha's eyes narrowed, but neither spoke further. The council dissolved, yet Alpharius felt no triumph. Each word he spoke carved another fracture in the Legion, even as it bound them outwardly. That night, in his chamber, he removed his helm and gazed again at the obsidian wall. His reflection stared back, and once more it shifted. Omegon's face gazed at him, the faint smile unreadable, patient, inevitable. Alpharius whispered into the dark, "If I fall, will you take my place? Or are you already here?" The reflection gave no answer, but Alpharius felt the weight of presence pressing against him, as though the wall itself held his brother within it. For a moment he wondered if the Alpha Legion had ever been two at all, or if he had lived his life as a single man divided by deception. On the dead world below, a landing party discovered ruins carved deep into the rock, halls that stretched into the planet's core. Alpharius descended alone, his footsteps echoing against stone that had not felt life in millennia. Symbols etched into the walls glowed faintly with energies long dormant, their meaning lost yet powerful. He walked among them, feeling the hum in his bones, and for a moment he thought of the old ones, of the Necrons, of forces older than even the Emperor's design. The galaxy was not theirs. It had never been theirs. They were only players on a stage raised long before their birth, and Alpharius felt the futility of it crush against his chest. He paused before a vast chamber, its walls lined with mirrors of obsidian, each reflecting his image back to him. Yet in every reflection, something was different. An angle of the head, a twist of the mouth, a shadow in the eyes. One stepped forward when he did not. One turned away. One smiled faintly, the smile of Omegon. Alpharius felt his breath catch, his hand tightening on his weapon, though no enemy stood before him. He whispered, "Which of us is true?" The reflections offered no answer. Instead, they moved apart, some aligning with him, others turning against. The chamber filled with infinite Alphariuses, infinite Omegons, infinite masks. He staggered back, the vision burning into his mind, and when the light dimmed, he was alone again, staring only at the black stone. When he returned to the fleet, his silence was deeper, his voice sharper. Orders were given with precision, but his men studied him as though searching for cracks in his mask. Myron's eyes burned with questions unspoken, Letha's with suspicion unending. Alpharius walked among them as a figure both feared and doubted, and he wondered if this was what it meant to lead. A crown not of loyalty, but of silence too heavy to bear. The fleet moved again, drawn into the wider war. They intercepted transmissions from both sides, calls for aid, cries for vengeance, demands for allegiance. Alpharius answered them all with half-truths and false reports, sending detachments to appear in two places at once, their loyalty impossible to discern. Some men believed they fought for the emperor. Others swore they struck for Horus. None knew the whole, and perhaps neither did Alpharius himself. The serpent had coiled so tightly around itself that even its master no longer knew where the head ended and the tail began. At last, alone once more upon the bridge, Alpharius stood before the viewport, watching the black hole shrink behind them. He thought of the ruins, of the mirrors, of the faces that were and were not his own. He thought of Myron's demand for truth, of Lethar's devotion to shadows, of the legion caught between, waiting for betrayal to make itself flesh. He whispered into the void, his voice almost breaking, "If betrayal must come, let it be mine. Let me bear it, so they may survive." The void swallowed his words, offering only silence. And in that silence, Alpharius knew the war he fought was no longer against the Imperium or Horus, nor against the gods who whispered through the warp. It was against himself, and in that war, victory was already slipping from his grasp. The serpent tightened, the reflection smiled, and the shadow deepened until even he could no longer tell where he ended and where the lie began. The fleet emerged from the warp into a system ablaze. The void burned with the wreckage of fleets shattered, their broken hulls drifting like corpses adrift in an endless sea. Fire licked across the black, remnants of plasma discharges flashing like dying suns. The Alpha Legion slipped among the debris as serpents in a graveyard, unseen, unheard, their presence masked by silence and the sheer chaos of destruction. Alpharius stood at the bridge's prow, his eyes fixed on the devastation, though behind his helm no one could read what thought shaped his silence. The galaxy was tearing itself apart, and in its fracture he felt the reflection of his own legions unraveling. Fragments of transmissions clawed their way into the ship's Vox systems. Horus's voice, fierce and commanding, urging his sons to drive deeper into the Imperium's heart. Loyalist cries, desperate yet unbroken, calling for aid in the name of the Emperor. Alpharius listened as both sides demanded loyalty, their voices carried like ghosts across the void. He gave no answer. His silence was the only reply, and yet within that silence he knew the serpent's coils tightened further. Myron was first to speak, his voice raw with restrained anger. "We cannot drift here as ghosts. The battle is real, and its outcome will shape everything. If we strike now, we may turn the tide. If we choose Horus, we may shatter the Imperium itself. If we stand for the Emperor, we may yet preserve what remains. But to linger, to remain shadows, is to waste our strength. His hand struck the table of the strategium, and sparks leapt from the holomap as though the galaxy itself recoiled from his fury. Lether's reply was colder, though his words cut sharper. To strike openly is to die openly. Shadows are our strength, and in shadows we remain eternal. If Horus wins, he will believe us his. If the Emperor endures, he will believe the same. The Legion does not need victory now. It needs to outlast. His voice was iron, his conviction carved from stone, yet Alpharius saw in his eyes the same flicker of doubt, the same shadow that lingered in every man who wore his colours. The other captains muttered in low tones, some leaning toward Myron's hunger for clarity, others toward Lether's devotion to secrecy. Alpharius remained silent, listening, letting their words coil and clash until the chamber itself seemed to choke on them. At last, he raised his hand, and the noise stilled. His voice was calm, deliberate, but heavy as lead. We are Alpha Legion. We are the lie given form. We will not strike openly. We will strike unseen, as we always have. This war is theirs, not ours. Yet we will walk among it, shaping it, twisting it, ensuring that no one, neither Emperor nor War Master, will ever know our true allegiance. The words settled into the chamber, but they carried no fire. The captains bowed their heads, but Alpharius knew belief had fled them long ago. They obeyed, but in obedience there was no loyalty, only silence. That night, he walked the ship's corridors alone, the hum of engines the only company. He paused before a steel panel, polished enough to catch his reflection, and once again it shifted. Omegon's face stared back, a faint smile on his lips, eyes dark with secrets. Alpharius whispered, "Are you with me, brother, or are you against me already?" The reflection did not answer, but the smile lingered, and Alpharius felt the weight of it pressing into his chest. Perhaps his twin was near, perhaps he was far, or perhaps he had never existed apart at all, and Alpharius had only ever been speaking to himself. On the world below, the battle's scars were carved into its very soil. Cities lay in ruins, their towers broken, their streets painted in ash. Alpharius descended alone, cloaked in distortion, walking among corpses that had not yet cooled. He passed broken banners of both loyalists and traitors. Neither side victorious, both sides betrayed by their own blood. He stood in a ruined square where once a statue of the Emperor had towered above the people, its face now shattered, its body burned. For a moment he stared at it, wondering if one day his own legion would leave nothing behind but broken stone and whispers of lies. As he turned to leave, he heard movement in the rubble. A soldier, wounded, half buried beneath debris, gasped for breath. His armor was painted in the livery of another legion. Iron hands, perhaps, though so burned it was difficult to tell. The man's eyes widened at Alpharius' towering form. "Which side?" the soldier rasped, blood seeping from his lips. "Emperor or Horus?" Alpharius paused, his shadow falling across the dying man. He could have spoken truth, but truth no longer existed. He could have lied, but lies had become his only language. At last, he knelt and whispered, "Both, neither. We are the shadow between." The soldier tried to speak again, but his breath fled and his body stilled. Alpharius stood, feeling the words linger like a curse. Both, neither. Shadow between. When he returned to the fleet, he carried the weight of that silence. Myron confronted him again, his voice trembling with fury. This cannot go on. They will not follow shadows forever. If you do not choose, they will choose for you. Lethar countered with icy calm. Let them try. Those who betray the Legion betray themselves. The shadow devours all. Alpharius listened, silent, while his captain's voices tore the chamber apart. He saw their eyes, burning with doubt, and knew the fracture widened beyond repair. He wondered if Omegon watched, waiting for the moment to step from shadow and claim what he could not hold. That night, Alpharius dreamed again. He stood on a battlefield lit by fire, his legion divided, his captains striking at one another. Myron's blade flashed, Lethar's eyes burned, and Alpharius himself stood between them, unable to move. Across the smoke, his twin appeared, silent, smiling faintly, as though he had always known it would come to this. When Alpharius reached for him, the dream shattered, and he woke with the taste of ash on his tongue. The fleet moved once more, deeper into the war, its movements hidden, its loyalties unreadable. To the Imperium they appeared as loyalists. To Horus they appeared as traitors in service of his cause. To themselves they appeared as shadows. Yet even the shadows were beginning to question their shape. Alpharius gave the orders with his voice steady. But within he felt the serpent tightening until his own breath grew thin. He stood again at the viewport, watching the dying light of distant suns, and whispered into the void, "If betrayal is the only truth, then let it come. Let it come for me, and not for them." The void gave no answer. Only the faint shimmer of unseen eyes lingered in the reflection, smiling with patience, as though his brother, or himself, was already waiting in the silence to claim what he could no longer hold. The fleet slid through the darkness like a blade beneath water, unseen and silent. Around them, the galaxy screamed in fire, but within the hulls of the Alpha Legion's ships, the quiet was heavier than war. Alpharius stood upon the bridge, helm concealing his face, watching a storm of distant battles unfold across fractured transmissions. Loyalist cries bled into traitor vows, signals layered atop one another until meaning dissolved into static. The galaxy demanded allegiance, demanded blood, demanded truth. Alpharius gave none. His silence was command enough, but silence no longer calmed his sons. It only sharpened their doubt. Whispers reached him, even in the deepest corridors of the flagship. Warriors muttered of captains plotting. Captains whispered of each other's betrayal, and behind every word, Alpharius felt his own name weigh heavier. Myron's fire spread like a fever, urging for clarity, for action. Lethar's cold defiance countered with iron, insisting shadows were their lifeblood. Between them, the Legion fractured, still bound in obedience but no longer united. Alpharius carried the weight of both, knowing that one day it would spill into open war among his own. Perhaps that day was already here, only waiting for its moment to reveal itself. He summoned Myron to his chamber. The captain entered with fire in his eyes, bowing with the discipline of a soldier, but his voice trembled with conviction. "They follow you because you are their Primarch, but they no longer believe you. They fight in silence, but crave truth. You must choose, my lord. Emperor or Horus. If you refuse, then someone else will choose for you." The words struck like blades, but Alpharius showed no movement. He studied Myron in silence, the man's armor scorched from too many battles, his eyes hollowed by doubt, yet blazing with determination. "And if I choose wrongly?" Alpharius asked, his voice low, steady. Myron hesitated, then answered, "Then at least we will know who we are. Even a wrong truth is stronger than endless lies." Alpharius dismissed him, but the words clung to him like a wound that would not close. Not long after, Lether came of his own will. His voice was calm, cold, filled with disdain for Myron's demands. Truth is weakness. Truth binds. Shadows are freedom. Let them whisper. Let them doubt. So long as they fear you, they will obey. If you give them clarity, you give them the weapon to destroy themselves. Alpharius turned to him, helm reflecting the faint light, and asked, "And if they destroy me instead?" Lether did not flinch. "Then you were never truly Alpha Legion." His words echoed in the chamber long after he had gone. That night, Alpharius did not dream. He wandered the silent halls of the flagship, his armor dimmed, his presence cloaked so that no one saw their Primarch pass. He listened to his warriors when they thought themselves alone. Some swore oaths to Horus in whispers, others prayed still to the Emperor, and many said nothing at all, only sat in silence as though their voices had been stolen by the void. Alpharius walked among them unseen and wondered if he had already lost them. Perhaps he had never held them at all. The fleet came upon a world half consumed by war. Fires burned across continents, cities shattered beneath orbital bombardments. Loyalists and traitors alike fought in the ruins, their banners indistinguishable in the smoke. Alpharius ordered the legion down, not as conquerors, but as phantoms. Operatives slipped into both camps, sowing lies, twisting orders, turning brother against brother. Entire companies marched into ambushes, their commanders betrayed by words whispered in the dark. The Alpha Legion guided the war without ever being seen, and when the dust settled, the world lay silent, neither side claiming victory. It was the perfect deception, yet Alpharius felt only hollowness. He walked the ruined streets in disguise, stepping over corpses that no longer bore names. He passed a soldier still clutching his banner, face frozen in defiance though death had already claimed him. Alpharius paused, staring at the tattered cloth, its colours burned beyond recognition. Was it loyalist or traitor? It no longer mattered. The dead carried no sides, no truths, only silence. For the first time, Alpharius wondered if silence itself was not victory, but defeat. In the ruins of the governor's palace, he found a mirror of obsidian still intact, its surface untouched by fire. He looked into it, and his reflection stared back. Yet once again, it shifted. Omegon's face gazed at him, the faint smile, patient, inevitable. Alpharius reached toward it, whispering, "If you stand against me, then strike. If you stand with me, then speak, but do not leave me in silence." The reflection gave no answer, only the smile remained. Alpharius clenched his fist, the sound of armor grinding in the empty hall, and turned away. When he returned to the fleet, the fracture had grown. Myron confronted him openly before the other captains, his voice burning with defiance. "We are lost. We drift in shadows, striking at ghosts, never knowing who we are. I will not watch this legion bleed itself dry. If you cannot choose, then others will." The chamber trembled with his words, captains shifting, hands tightening near blades. Lether stepped forward, his voice cold as ice. "Speak again, Myron, and you declare yourself traitor. The Primarch's silence is command enough." The two men stared at one another, fire against frost, and Alpharius saw in their eyes the inevitability of blood. He raised his hand, halting them, his voice cutting through the storm. "You will obey. Both of you. The Legion endures because it is shadow, not truth, not loyalty, shadow." His words silenced them, but not their hatred. He saw it burn behind their eyes, and he knew it would not stay hidden forever. That night, Alpharius dreamed once more. He stood on a battlefield littered with his own sons, their armor torn, their faces hidden. Myron lay dead with his blade still raised. Letha lay beside him, his eyes open, cold and lifeless. And across the field, Omegon stood, untouched, silent, his smile faint but certain. Alpharius walked toward him, but the ground crumbled beneath his feet, and he fell into darkness. He woke with his breath shallow, the vision clinging to him like chains. The fleet moved on, vanishing into the warp once more. Alpharius stood upon the bridge, staring into the endless dark. The galaxy burned on every horizon, yet within the Alpha Legion the greater war raged unseen. A war of silence, of reflection, of betrayal, waiting to break its mask. He whispered into the void, his voice low, unsteady. If betrayal is truth, then let it be mine, but not theirs. Let them survive, even if only as shadows. The void did not answer, but his reflection in the viewport smiled faintly, patient, inevitable, as though his twin, or himself, was already waiting to take what he could no longer hold. The ship's lights dimmed to red as the alarm whisper pulsed through the decks. No sirens, no klaxons, only the low, rhythmic signal that meant an event had occurred without witness. Alpharius stood alone in the central observation chamber, his hands clasped behind his back as the stars drifted slowly beyond the curved glass. Behind him, the footsteps came, measured, armored, and unannounced. He did not turn. He already knew who had entered. Myron's presence carried weight now, not merely from rank, but from inevitability. The moment had arrived. "My lord," Myron said, voice low but not bowed. There was respect in it, but the kind given before a final blow. "Lethar is dead." Alpharius did not move, nor blink. The words carried no shock, only the cold confirmation of something long prophesied. How? In his quarters, not in battle. The lock was overridden. His guards were missing when the body was found. "By your hand?" "No," Myron said. And in that word, there was something strange, neither denial nor admission. "But I will not weep for him." The silence between them deepened, not uncomfortable, but surgical. It peeled back all pretense. Alpharius slowly turned, helm removed, face bare and without expression. Myron looked older than when the war began, gaunt, hollow around the eyes, not from fatigue, but from carrying too many questions without answers. "They say he died facing his killer," Myron said, stepping forward. "But he didn't raise his blade. I think he knew." Alpharius nodded once, faintly. Letha believed in silence more than obedience. He would rather die than compromise it. And yet, we are left with neither. The statement settled like dust. Alpharius walked toward the display console, where a planet turned slowly beneath them, a lifeless moon that served as the last stop before the next convergence of war. "The Legion," he said softly, "is no longer unified by shadows, only haunted by them. They wait for you to speak. If I speak, they will fracture. If you remain silent, they will tear each other apart." The lights overhead flickered. Somewhere deep in the ship, a power cycle reset itself. The room darkened for only a moment, but it was enough for Alpharius to see the faint echo in the glass. His reflection, and behind it, another. The smile that never aged. The twin he never quite outran. Omegon, or the thought of him. "I do not know if I am still leading," Alpharius said, "or if I am only walking the path my twin already set in motion." "Then set your own," Myron answered, "or end it." There was no threat in the words, only exhaustion. A call chimed at the edge of the chamber. A voice over the vox filtered through distortion. Fleet-wide transmission prepared on your order, my lord, awaiting content. Alpharius stared at the console. The opportunity stood before him. A declaration, an answer. Emperor or Horus, silence or allegiance. For a single moment, he saw it clearly. The entire legion arrayed before him, every soul waiting to hear which mask to wear next. If he said the name of the emperor, half would follow and half would rebel. If he named Horus, the result would be the same. There was no unity to be found in truth, only in deception, only in ambiguity. And yet that path had already begun to collapse. Letha's death proved it. The shadow no longer protected. It devoured. He could not speak. He could not remain silent. He turned from the console. Prepare a false signal, fragmented. Make it appear intercepted. Have it contain conflicting loyalties. One half calling for a strike on Terra, the other for reinforcement to Ultramar. Let it be traced, but never confirmed. Let them believe we are everywhere, loyal to all and committed to none. Myron's face didn't change. And our true objective. Alpharius stepped close, lowering his voice until it was barely breath. We go to the edge of the eye. There is a world there, a place the warp does not touch cleanly, a place even Horus avoids. What do we seek? Not truth, Alpharius said, but erasure. The chamber lights flickered again. Somewhere in the silence, the hum of the ship deepened as the engines began their slow, hidden burn. Myron hesitated, then gave a nod, not of agreement, but of acceptance. He turned and left without another word. Alpharius remained, alone once more. He walked to the viewport and rested his hand against the cold glass. In its surface, his reflection stared back, older, perhaps. Weary, but still unreadable, still him. And then the flicker. Omegon again, not smiling this time, but watching, waiting. I know you're out there, Alpharius whispered. And I know one of us must end this. He pressed his forehead against the glass, the metal of his armor creaking with the weight he carried. The serpent had coiled too tightly. It had begun to eat its own mind. He thought of his sons, not just the captains, but the legionnaires, the operatives, the nameless soldiers on nameless worlds. He thought of the masks they wore, the names they had erased. He wondered if any of them remembered who they truly were anymore, or if they had become ghosts in armor, actors in a play without a writer. He closed his eyes and saw them falling, not in glory, not even in battle, but in silence, betraying each other in rooms lit only by flickering consoles, whispering commands that no longer had meaning, a legion that vanished not because it was defeated, but because it had become so hidden even its own heart could not find itself. He opened his eyes. The glass reflected only himself now. No twin, no smile, no shadow behind him. For the first time in decades, Alpharius felt alone. He stepped back from the glass and gave the final order. Begin the descent. As the ship turned toward the unnamed world at the edge of the eye, the stars bent slightly, as though even the light feared to follow. Alpharius remained still, a statue of command, even as the war beyond raged louder. And far beneath the noise of it all, the Alpha Legion moved, silent, divided, and unseen, waiting for the moment when one brother would finally find the other. And the lie would end. The planet had no name, no records, no myth. It hung at the edge of the Eye of Terror like a secret that had erased itself. From orbit, it appeared featureless, veiled in dull grey cloud and static, its surface a labyrinth of ash plains and fractured canyons that defied mapping. The warp's pull twisted light around it, but the world itself resisted corruption. Not clean, but not corrupted either, as if something had long ago denied chaos entry and had never rescinded the rejection. Alpharius stood in the descent chamber, his armor sealed, his expression unreadable beneath the helm. Around him, the operatives said nothing. They had been chosen not for loyalty, but for silence. No insignias marked them, no banners, no oaths. They were the last reflection of the Legion as he had once dreamed it, faceless, precise, and alone. The storm began as soon as they entered atmosphere. Not fire nor lightning, but distortion, Vox signals collapsing into echo, Auspex readouts spiraling into nonsense. The land beneath them shimmered as if viewed through shattered glass, and for a breathless second, Alpharius felt as if he was being observed by something vast and invisible, something that regarded lies with amusement. The Thunderhawk pierced the clouds in silence. When the ramp dropped, the world was waiting. It was not dead. It was still. Wind moved across jagged plains, whispering through canyons carved by forces long forgotten. Obsidian spires jutted from the surface at impossible angles, casting shadows that did not match the light. Alpharius stepped out first, and for a moment he felt the planet exhale beneath him. Not welcome, not warning, just acknowledgement, as if the world had been expecting him for longer than time could measure. They moved in silence, the team fanning out across the ruins of structures so old they seemed grown rather than built. Alpharius advanced alone toward a central tower of impossible geometry, its surface etched in patterns that shifted as one looked away. His hand brushed the stone, and the air hummed, not with warp energy, but something colder, buried, restrained. He entered the structure. Within, the silence thickened into something nearly sentient. The walls were lined with mirrors, each one slightly imperfect, their surfaces warped like water held in tension. And in each mirror, every single one, he saw himself. Not identical. Each reflection bore subtle variations, a different tilt of the head, a different expression, some older, some younger, some wearing armor, not his own. He stood in the center of them, surrounded by thousands of possible selves, and none of them moved when he did. Then one stepped forward. Alpharius did not draw his weapon. The figure approached with slow, measured steps, face bare, calm. Same eyes, same face, same voice. When it spoke, "You've come far, brother." He said nothing. The figure looked around at the mirrors. This is the place where truth does not survive, where the reflection becomes the original, and the original becomes myth. Alpharius removed his helm, revealing his face to the one who wore it already. "Are you Omegon?" The figure smiled faintly. "Am I?" He circled Alpharius slowly, not threatening, not evasive, like a shadow remembering its shape. "Does it matter?" he continued. "You've led the Legion so long, without knowing whether you were the twin or the origin, and they followed you, even as you lost them." Alpharius's voice was low. "Then what are you?" "A choice," the reflection answered. "One you were never allowed to make." They stood inches apart now, both unarmed, both masked in the same skin. Around them, the mirrors showed infinite versions of this confrontation. Some violent, some weeping, some kneeling, some laughing. Omegon, or the image of him, raised his hand slowly and pressed it against Alpharius's chestplate. "You came here to end something." "I came here to end myself," Alpharius said. Omegon stepped back. "Then you already know the cost." The mirrors around them flickered. For a moment, every reflection turned to face Alpharius. Every possibility converged on him. Loyalist, traitor, savior, assassin, martyr, monster, and in every image his face held the same expression: exhaustion. "I see you," Omegon said. "I see the burden, the war behind your eyes. You carried the lie longer than anyone else could have." "I carried nothing," Alpharius whispered. "The lie carried me." A long silence passed. Then Omegon, if it was him, turned toward the heart of the chamber, where a single plinth stood, dark stone, slick with a sheen of starlight. Upon it lay a single curved blade, silver black, humming with no sound at all. A blade without past, without name. Alpharius stepped toward it, fingers brushing the hilt. He lifted it. The metal was impossibly cold. The room dimmed. The reflections flickered and warped, as though reality itself hesitated. Omegon nodded. "This is where the serpent ends, with choice." Alpharius turned the blade in his hand. He looked into the nearest mirror. His reflection did not match. It smiled. He turned back to the twin. "Will you take the Legion?" "I already have," the twin said. Alpharius closed his eyes. He saw Myron's eyes, burning with questions. Letha's corpse, cold and silent. His Legion, fractured and bleeding. And behind it all, his own face, echoed endlessly, lost in the reflections of a mask he could no longer remove. He opened his eyes. The blade pierced his side, slid cleanly between armor plates, into the space where a heart once beat. No cry, no resistance, only breath, leaving slowly. Alpharius fell to his knees, the mirrors flickering around him. Omegon knelt beside him, one hand on his shoulder. "They will remember you as the one who stood for both sides, as the one who chose silence." Alpharius tried to speak, but no sound came. His final thought was not of victory, nor failure, nor vengeance. It was of the sea, a world long gone, a memory of waves crashing against rock. He could not remember its name, only the sound, then nothing. The blade was placed back upon the plinth. The twins stood in silence, and in every mirror, every reflection, every version of Alpharius, he vanished. The serpent was still, but the shadow remained. The body lay at the center of the obsidian chamber, surrounded by mirrors that now reflected nothing. Not Alpharius, not Omegon, not even light. The face, so often masked by helm or lie, was bare, its features peaceful, unreadable, almost unfamiliar in death. The blade rested beside him, untouched since it had been returned to the plinth. No ceremony followed. No rites were spoken. The Legion did not know. The galaxy did not notice. One of the greatest figures of the age had vanished, and the silence that followed was as deliberate as his life had been. Above the world, the fleet hovered in stillness, its movements suspended. The transmissions from the surface had ceased. The operatives sent with Alpharius were recalled in silence, unaware of what had occurred, carrying only encrypted data cores and instructions they could not interpret. The captains met in council soon after, and when they demanded to speak to the Primarch, a voice replied through the darkened chamber. Not Alpharius, not one they recognized, but one that held his weight, calm, controlled, indistinguishable. "I am Alpharius," the voice said. There were no questions. None dared to challenge it. Not Myron, not those loyal to Letha's cold code. The war had trained them to obey shadows, and this was no different. Yet something had changed. The silence had shifted. Orders continued to arrive, coordinated with impossible precision. Strike teams deployed to opposing fronts, simultaneously aiding loyalist and traitor causes. Targets vanished, archives collapsed. The Alpha Legion moved with more unity than it had in years, but it was a unity built not on loyalty, but on distance. No one saw the Primarch again. No one knew who commanded. And the deeper truth buried beneath them all was this: no one could be sure if it was still Alpharius. The Legion fractured in new ways, but never visibly. Cells operated in increasing isolation. Identities blurred. Ciphers became doctrine. Operatives received instructions from voices they had never heard. At first, there was discomfort, but in time, comfort returned. Not in knowing, but in forgetting. They did not need to believe in the Primarch. They only needed to believe he was watching. That was enough. On the surface of the nameless world, the obsidian tower remained, sealed once more. No beacon marked it. No structure broadcast coordinates. It slipped from stellar records. Navigation logs corrupted themselves when approaching its orbit. Whatever force had shielded the planet before now expanded its veil, swallowing even memory. And within the chamber, the mirrors stood still. The body no longer remained. It had faded or been taken, or perhaps had never truly been there at all. In the years that followed, the Alpha Legion's actions became increasingly surreal. Fleets that had supposedly been destroyed reappeared weeks later in different livery. Kill teams surfaced on opposing sides of the same battlefield, claiming contradictory allegiances. Worlds were won, then lost, then forgotten. The other legions began to speak of them as phantoms. Astartes from other chapters reported encounters with warriors who wore Alpha Legion colors, only to discover later they had never been there. Captured agents gave conflicting reports under interrogation. Some claimed to serve the Emperor. Some claimed Horus. Some claimed neither. A few wept and admitted they no longer knew who they were. At the heart of it all, the name Alpharius endured, and with it, the phrase spoken with increasing frequency. Across Vox networks, encrypted dossiers, battlefield whispers. A phrase that carried no comfort, only the echo of something lost and unclaimed. I am Alpharius. In that phrase was identity and erasure, brotherhood and betrayal. It was no longer clear if the speaker meant loyalty or mockery. Perhaps they no longer knew themselves. Perhaps that was the point. There were those who searched for the truth. Inquisitors, historians, sons of other legions who had once fought beside him. They followed rumors across forgotten worlds, intercepted half-buried signals, decoded messages that led only deeper into misdirection. A few found something, data fragments, glimpses of a world on the edge of the eye, reports of a Primarch seen entering a chamber of mirrors, but each clue contradicted the next. Some claimed he was still alive, guiding his sons from the dark. Others believed he had died by his own hand. A few believed he had never existed at all, that Alpharius was only ever a mask worn by many, and the true Primarch had vanished before the heresy had even begun. And in the darkest corners of the galaxy, in tombs unlit for millennia, ancient machines recorded no death, no soul departing, no psychic flare. The Primarch's presence faded without trace. Even the warp seemed uncertain of what had passed. The demons who whispered in the eye could not agree. Some said Alpharius had fled to the edge of time. Others claimed he had walked into the warp and never emerged. A few laughed, saying he still walked among his sons, changing face each year, body after body, eternal not through godhood, but through anonymity. What endured was uncertainty, not silence, but noise without source. 1,000 voices, each claiming to be the first. A legion of shadows, none sure where the light had gone. And among them, sometimes, a warrior would stop and stare at his own reflection, would see something unfamiliar in the mirrored glass. A smile, perhaps, a flicker of recognition, a tilt of the head that did not belong to him. They would not speak of it, But later, when giving their name, they would hesitate, and then say it. I am Alpharius, and somewhere far beyond charted stars, past the places where time flows straight and gravity holds meaning, a chamber still waits, a mirror still stands, and in it a shadow lingers, not moving, not still, just watching. He had been a son of the Emperor, a traitor to the Imperium, a loyalist in disguise, a betrayer of all, a savior unseen. He had been truth and lie and everything between. He had sought clarity and found only himself, mirrored endlessly. He had walked the path of silence until even silence could no longer hold him. And in the end, he became what he always feared, a reflection with no original, a name without a soul, a brother no longer known,